Okay, so we are at 2 p.m. now. So welcome back from lunch, everybody. I am so glad to see everyone back in here. For our next session, we are going to have a very special event. We are going to be having a discussion specifically aimed towards American Astronomical Society members or AAS members who may be presenting at the upcoming January AAS meeting. However, if you are not a AAS member, feel free to stick around, pay attention, or participate in this um, activities that are going to be happening and any discussion that will be happening. It's going to be a very interesting presentation about how to make your presentations more accessible. And in order to talk about that, we're going to be having Kate Meredith and Cheryl Fogle-Hatch, both wonderful presenters who are going to be talking about how and why it is important to make your presentations accessible. Kate, Cheryl, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Caitlin. I appreciate it. I'm Kate Meredith. I'm the President and Director of Education from Geneva Lake Astrophysics and STEAM. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a white female with long brown hair. It's in a ponytail today. I'm wearing my favorite purple computer glasses, and I'm at my office here in what is now snowy Wisconsin. So we are really glad to be here today, and I am representing the GLAS Education team. Our mission is really about making STEM and astrophysics research and content accessible to everyone in a number of different areas. So, and we're happy to have been partnering with Dr. Cheryl Fogle-Hatch from Museum Senses over the last couple of years on a number of different projects, including the Astronomy project and this one. Her expertise has been extremely helpful, and Caitlin has also assisted with putting this presentation together. So again, let's see if I can get my slides to advance properly here. So this presentation came about from not only the interests of SciAccess and GLAS Education, but also through the support of a grant through the AAS, the American Astronomical Society Education Committee mini grants. And we're going to be covering a number of different areas in the next 2 days. Everyone's welcome to be here. We're going to take a little more of a deep dive into the tools that are embedded in PowerPoint to create accessible presentations. So we're going to be looking at, we're on slide 2, we're going to be looking at creating accessible content using PowerPoint. And on day 2 of this, we're going to present how to present that accessible content from making when you're at a conference, how can you present in a way, even given the constraints of the conference, make that more accessible? And we're going to be highlighting the American Astronomical Society annual meeting, which is a large meeting of astronomers in the US and internationally. There's usually about 2,000 to 3,000 attendees per conference. It can be quite a noisy place, quite a large place, and we're going to be covering different types of presentations, oral sessions and poster presentations in particular. So we'll be taking a look at those. And so this is day 1 of that. So heading on to slide, how am I getting to slide 3? Okay. I am a little confused on my presentation is skipping some slides here, I think, but we'll, so SciAccess AAS is from the, supported by the AAS Education Committee, a professional development grant. And our aim for this is to significantly increase the accessibility of presentations and posters at the AAS meetings. And as I was listening to the presenters this morning, what I found to be a theme that we're going to be reiterating is that we can all listen to how to do things, but until we dive in and just try to do a little bit more and not expect ourselves to be expert or wait until we do feel confident to take this on, just to be willing to create and try is where we start with this. And we are here, we wrote this grant in order to increase that accessibility by providing additional support time to practice and mentoring, and then feedback after the conference. And we'll go through some of the steps that you're going to need to take in order to do that. So our next slide, number 5, why do we care about this? So at a AAS meeting, at a large conference, we know that 4% of AAS members report to having a visual or auditory disability. And an estimated 20% of the population doesn't disclose their disability. And we've heard those statistics already during the SciAccess conference. We also know that it's normalizing access, providing access as an intrinsic, embedded part of how you do things is what creates the culture of inclusiveness that is essential for achieving the gap, to closing the achievement gap for STEM professionals with disabilities. And until it's just easy, so you have the same access, so you can decide which presentations you want to go to at the last minute, like everybody else does at the conference. Until you're able to do that, you really don't have equal access. And those are the things that are essential for early career professionals advancing in their fields, particularly in astronomy. So, and also I put on my last bullet point on this slide is that if you aren't in the front row at a AAS meeting, is there anyone who can really see the slides? So everything that we're putting out today could be helpful to anybody. And at the beginning of this presentation, you saw a QR code up, and that's where we're going to get you to in terms of content presentation today. We're going to get you to the point where you have created your own QR code and people are able to access the presentation as they come into a room and look at it on their phone or on their laptop and zoom in or see things more easily and not rely on necessarily the venue to accommodate that. It'll be on the presenter to provide that. And today's QR code goes to a Google Drive. So if you don't have the app on your phone or on your laptop, wherever you're accessing from, you might run into some bumps. And please let us know if there's if you have a preference for where you'd like to see PDFs shared so that that access is available. So we're going to get to that, what that looks like at the end of the presentation. But for those of you who are able to capture that QR code at the beginning, that's what that's there for. So then moving on to the next slide, number 6, I went over where we're going to start with. We're going to take you from a PowerPoint presentation to a PDF. I chose PowerPoint because there's a lot of accessibility features built into that tool. Many of the people who are presenting at AAS are associated with an educational institution that provides access to PowerPoint, and most people at AAS meetings create both their posters or their oral presentations, at least starting with PowerPoint. Other people do use other tools such as Overleaf or Canva. One person even said they use Illustrator. We will be, hopefully there's going to be something in here that you can access as well or transfer to some of those other tools, but we'll be focusing on PowerPoint. And so we're going to go from starting with a PowerPoint presentation, creating a slide deck, and running an accessibility checker, how to correct for errors, and that'll be embedded in throughout this, this presentation, how to export that as a PDF in a way that will actually be successful in preserving all of the accessibility features you put in, and deciding where you're going to place that PDF, creating a QR code, and having it available. For those of you who are attending who are AAS members, you're going to send your presentation and PDF file, your source file, to a special email address, which will send you all this information out again after the conference, because most of you aren't going to be starting your presentations for January, at least until December. So we'll go over as well how you're going to get support in creating accessible presentations. So just sit back, relax, and know that there's support coming, and we're going to be happy to provide that for you. All right, so slide number 7. So we're going to begin. Where did we come up with this overall structure? So what we've observed over the years at AAS meetings is that there have been many presentations and resources available to people about how to make presentations more accessible, but it doesn't translate into what actually happens at the conference. And why is that? So we looked at the research across a wide area, but one that we really liked was Elias Lohman, Orr, and Wald, 2018, and that's on this slide, so you can access that later. That study indicates that unless people have support and feedback and more support, that those won't really translate into a change of behavior and how we change the culture of doing accessible presentations. So we've looked at that research, that it's not helpful if there's mandates. It's not helpful if people are forced to do it. It's encouraging a change in culture and supporting that to happen. Most people are interested, but it's encouraging that to happen. So what we want to do through our grant is to provide that kind of support. And so Elias et al. Divided their accessibility analysis for slides into a number of different areas. And one of them, the first level, is called the metadata. And so we're going to look at what runs in the background that we can do to make everything about your presentation more accessible, the actual content of it. So we're going to look at color contrast, difference of color perception, font size, and including differences between title and body text. And then what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give some examples to you in terms of creating an accessible template from PowerPoint. You could do this also, accessible templates in Word, but I'm going to focus on PowerPoint. And creating an accessible template to start with may take some more time. I'm on slide number 8, but it will save you time in the future. So my title of this slide is Making Your Template Saves Time Eventually. So in order to make an accessible template, so you can do this just one slide at a time, one presentation at a time, or you can create a template that's there for you for all time, and you'll never have to do this again until you want to tweak something. So from PowerPoint, you're going to go to the new form template. And search for accessible. Now I'm going to have some screen captures showing this in just a moment. You're going to choose a template that you like, or it's provided by the institution. In the slide master, you're going to make some changes, and then you can save it as a template. So in the next slide, I'm going to go back through these steps. So step number 1, we want to create an accessible template. You can search for already created templates that are made to have the proper color contrast, font size, and font type in PowerPoint. So what this slide is showing you is where that menu is. So if you're searching for this, hit search, you could type in accessible, or I would recommend accessible science, and then you'll get a selection of presentations to start from. That was slide 9. Now to slide 10, alternative template, alternative step. You can create one from scratch, choose any template that you want, and then assess the slide through the slide master one at a time. Or you can start with a template from your university. I'd strongly recommend that you still, even if you're given it a template from your university to use your institution, go through it, and when you find things you want to tweak or change, share those changes with people so that we can increase accessibility automatically for everyone else with less work. So this slide shows that you can start from scratch. So there's a number of different types of templates shown on this slide. So slide number 11 shows, again, the steps that you're going to go through. We're going to look at creating a slide master. So in PowerPoint, from the view menu, you're going to go to master and then slide master. Now I'm working on a Mac computer today, so if all the screen, I will put the keyboard shortcut commands are all accounted for in the alt text for each one of these slides. I won't be announcing them today because I get my commands, open apples and things all confused. So I'm just going to leave those out and provide those to you in a separate document. So we're on slide 11, showing you where to access the slide master, which is where we're going to change this metadata so it's more accessible. So number 4, slide 11, or slide 12, we're looking at how you're going to, once you hit that slide master, you're going to show on the left-hand side, it's going to show you every single slide possibility that you could have on your slides. What you want to start with that first slide. You want to make as many changes on that first slide because those will propagate to all the specific different visual layouts that are accounted for beneath that. So you want to adjust every single slide, starting with that top slide. This is where you're going to change your font and your sizes that will propagate through all of those. So you want to adjust all of those. You want to watch for contrast, and you can customize all the elements or delete slides that you don't find useful or you just don't even want to have access to. Sometimes the template will provide something that looks a little visually cluttered, is too busy. Those are the ones that I would watch out for. And by the time you've gone through all 30 of the possibilities that PowerPoint's going to provide for you, you may just decide that less is more. So on to slide 13. Let me just say a word about contrast. So this is another one of those metadata pieces that you want to keep track of. So I provided a resource that you have access to in this PDF. It's called Accessible Web. And Accessible Web is a website which you can then take the hex code or the color code for two particular colors, plug them in, and it will give you the brightness rate contrast ratio for those two colors and let you know, are they good colors to put together a background with a print? And it doesn't matter which order you put them in. So the example in this slide is black next to white or white next to black. It doesn't matter which is on top. We'll always have a brightness ratio of 21:1. And the brightness ratio, I put the colors from the y-axis slides in here as a purple and a teal color. And we put those together, the brightness ratio for that is 2.44:1, which is below what we're aiming for. So when you make your slides, we want you to go to the accessible web checker, check your color contrast. And what we'd like to see is a ratio of 4.5:1 for print and background. The two colors you see here, I put it up just so you see one that doesn't have sufficient color, but you'll never see on any of the y-axis slides, the purple with the blue with print. There'll always be white on one of those colors. So what I wanted to show you is that, those of us who are visual can still play with color and still have accessibility in mind. So that is a really fun tool to work with. And if you have an eyedropper tool, no matter where you are, whether it's through PowerPoint or an app or an extension through whatever browser you're choosing to use, you should be able to grab those color codes. And if you have trouble figuring if the color code is a hanging up point, please let us know and I will make sure that I provide you some additional resources for grabbing those codes. But I think you'll have a lot of fun with that. The next slide, number 14, is letting us know about, we want to consider how other color perceptions will receive the information that you're putting on your slide. So up here, I have a color palette taken from a site called Color Testing website. And that link will take you to a site that not only explains the different types of color blindness or color perception differences. And what this shows is on the far left, they have a palette as it's presented if you had normal vision. And then they have 3 different types of color blindness, 2 blue, red, green deficiency, and 1 for a yellow deficiency, and how those colors look. So above, there's a bar about halfway, 4 colors down that shows what you'll be presented for when you enter the website. And then you can add your own colors to this palette and see how it presents. And I think this is very interesting. And what I want you to do is take away from this is you don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but the colors from the y-axis conference I put into the color palette bar. They're below the yellow line on the far left. And you'll see that as you move across, that there are contrast issues. But because y-axis organizers have chosen to always put a white font on top of one of those, that you're not going to run into any problems with color perception. So you can still keep using your fun colors. Be aware, though, of how your colors are coming across to others. And never use only color to communicate information. So if you're making a chart or a graph, make sure that if you're using color to communicate that information, you've also used either a sonification or words or some other way of communicating that particular piece of content. So that was slide 14. We're on to slide 15. Now, finally, a little bit about fonts. Most people know something about fonts, and we could go into them for quite some time. Fonts are really fun, and they're coming out with lots of different types of fonts for different abilities. So there's dyslexic specific fonts. There are, lots of different types of ways of manipulating fonts. For our AAS presentations, what we want to get to on here is see everyone avoid serif fonts. So serif fonts are the ones with the little fancy terminators on the letters. And sans serif they're blocky. There's nothing at the end, at the top of the T, at the edge or the bottom that adds a little bit of flourish to it. And there's lots of really interesting sans serif fonts out there for you to choose from. So the slide, so we're only caring about whether it's a sans serif font. And if you want to learn more about fonts, and the diversity of interests with different fonts from blind people themselves, check out the Perkins blog about fonts that is listed in this slide. That is an interesting read. There's also other places that you can search on the web for that. We're also looking for on the AAS presentations that you do a minimum of 24-point font for the titles minimum and 18 minimum for the content. And I would suggest going higher than that, depending on whether you know what kind of room you're going to be doing it in. So the larger the room, the larger the font. Okay. Slide to number 15. So now we're back to, we've got these metadata taken care of in our presentation. We're going to look at this template, their last step. We want to save it as a template in PowerPoint. So this graphic shows just where that save as template is in the save menu. And there is no keyboard command shortcut for that. So good luck with that. We'll have to talk to PowerPoint, Microsoft about that. So going on to slide 16, now your templates are ready to use. So we have templates are available by choosing new from template from the file menu. So the graphic shows the file menu, arrows new from template, and then there's another overlay of the screen that shows the different templates that I have created for GLAS Education. So I have a few that I use depending upon where I'm presenting. Okay. Slide number 18. So in Elias's research, the next area that they're talking about of accessibility is this next section is creating your presentation itself. Do your slides follow a consistent format or flow? So the layout of the slides, what are you choosing for them? And Elias goes into a little bit more detail on this. We chose for the AAS meetings to ask you to simply think about how that information is visually laid out, particular for people who have low vision or sitting in the back of the room to make things easier. So a couple ways that you can do this to check your layout. If you want to scan quickly, you go to, in PowerPoint, you go to View and go to Outline View. Outline View pops up a menu on the left-hand side or list of each of your slides, and it gives you the content of each of those slides. It allows you to go down quickly and make a decision as to, did I overload those slides with word information? Or do I have a unique title for each slide? Having a unique title is going to be important if you're accessing the slides using a screen reader later on, because a screen reader is going to be, it'll make it easier for someone who's depending on a screen reader to find information if you have a unique title for each slide. So if you need to tweak it just a little bit, that will be helpful. The other thing that you can do is then go to the slide sorter. The slide sorter will pop up a smaller thumbnail of each one of the slides in your presentation, and it will allow you to scan through. And what I do is if I'm scanning through and I have to look twice at a slide to remember what was on it, that's an indication to me that I have a slide like this one that you're looking at right now that has too much visual information on it. So what I would do if I was scanning through and I saw the slide that you're looking at right now, I would think about how could I split the visual information that's on the slide into two slides. Also, there are some people who rely on Zoom text. So a app on their computers that allows them to greatly magnify the content of the screen. And when you the app will, what it does is adjust the resolution so that when you're blowing it up and making it zoom in, that the resolution is still high quality, but then that makes it a little bit more difficult for people to, or easier actually, for people to get lost on the screen. So that's another reason why we want to keep the amount of visual content on the screen clear. So that was slide 19. We're now on slide 20. So we want to, between one section to the next on a slide presentation, and this also goes for those of you who are creating posters at AAS meetings, to keep the section layout consistent. So in slides, it's going from one topic to the next. You want to announce on a slide that you're changing topics. And on posters, you want to make it very clear. Am I talking about my abstract or my discussion? Am I talking about my methods? Make sure that that I have a consistent way of presenting those pieces so that if somebody's scanning through using Zoom text or they're relying on their screen reader to tab through the information, that you'll be able to find that. So this slide reminds you to simple slides between topics are helpful, but not always practical when you have short presentation times at AASs. So use your best judgment. What are you trying to get through? But make sure you've announced that you have changed topics. So try to put those in, but you don't get much time at AAS oral presentations sometimes to always do that. And the minimal layout changes. So between each section, try and keep the layout changes same per section so that people using Zoom text don't have to reorient themselves to the information. So the next section I'm going to be talking about is building individual slides. And Elias et al. Talks about this, they call it the slide piece. So we're going to go through a number of pieces of information about the slide in particular that you're going to need to keep in mind. And this is where I would invite Cheryl, if you'd like to jump in. We're on slide 22. We're talking about slides and how we can create individual slides that have accessible information.
Sure.
And you can introduce yourself as well, because I didn't do a very good job of that.
That's all right. Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl.
And I will keep advancing the slides for you.
Okay, perfect. My name is Cheryl Fogle-Hatch. I was trained professionally as an archaeologist. I now work in museums, and I have been working with Kate on a lot of document editing and stuff with astronomy, and learning quite a bit about astronomy in the last couple of years with sonification, which has been fun. I am a white woman. I'm wearing red and white blouse today, and I'm coming to you from my home office in Baltimore, where it's not snowing, but it has been raining. So each image on each slide needs to have an alternative, or alt text for short. This is a short description of what's in the images. And for these presentations, you can make short alt text that your screen reader comes across on each image, but you can also link to longer descriptions that have more detail. We recommend that you do not describe the institutional logo. You can just say University of XYZ logo. You don't have to describe all the fancy castle or the font or whatever it happens to be. Keep language concise, and because part of that is your character limits for your alt text. Avoid redundance. Don't say this image shows, just say pictured are 2 star systems and a black hole, or whatever it happens to be. Don't duplicate a lot of text from elsewhere in your presentation. For graphs and charts, do a short overview and provide a link to an accessible version if you've got it. Data in table formats is pretty good for this. And avoid placing a lot of text in images. And of course, never place a table on a slide as an image. There are ways to make tables accessible in PowerPoint. There's using the table wizard. So getting back to alt text, there's places to edit it, and there's a dialogue for it. And Microsoft, they do some interesting things with, you should put in your alt text yourself, but it may try to automatically figure it out. And for scientific topics, this can be interesting. For example, I once had a picture of stone arrowheads. They're big and triangular. And the automatic description said mountain range because the triangles were different size and it thought it was a peak. So I had to go in and change that. And if you activate the object description, alt text is part of the properties. This slide shows the window where you put it in, and that alt text will be with that image on that slide once you put it in. It's with picture properties and a bunch of other things. Going on with tables, you want to make your tables simple. Don't do nested rows and columns or merged cells. This will cause screen readers to lose track of the data. And Kate didn't say this, screen reader is voice output on a computer. I'm just realizing she didn't say that earlier, but if you're accessing the computer and you happen to be blind, you're listening to it read out from your video to your sound card and output that as spoken text. In order to help with screen reader navigation, you assign headings and tags to the columns and rows so that as I'm going down, it'll be, oh, I don't know, light years from Earth, and across it'll be the planet or whatever. I'm just making stuff up. And again, you get to all of this through the creation tools in PowerPoint. Do not, under any circumstances, manually put in tabs and try to fake the table layouts. They will not read properly. Likewise, do not under any circumstances bold text and assume the headings to read properly. Always use the creation wizards. And then tables, slide titles, images, hyperlinks, some things to go through. You can have your presenters on that table. I'm kind of scrolling through Kate's slide here. The table ribbon is where you get to the accessible ribbons on yes, you go to insert and table under PowerPoint and all of that things come up, and that was her. Moving on, we mentioned linking to accessible versions of data tables or linking to longer descriptions. Describe what the link goes to. Don't say link here or here. Say link to data, or say data table for, I don't know, distance from planets. And just the screen reader will tell you it's a link. If it's coded properly as insert link. Keyboard command under Windows is Control K. Her shortcuts have the command key option. Under Windows, it's always Control. If you must put the entire URL, go ahead and do that. It's better than just saying link, 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 but really long URLs can be tedious to read. For example, Google Docs loves to assign really, really long URLs to files. And you really could just link the title. So description of, I don't know, solar system with planet 9, hypothetical alien invasion, I don't know. And then the screen capture there for the link. Again, it's insert on the ribbons. And Kate has done a good job of showing you where that's located. There are keyboard shortcut documents in Microsoft that I'm constantly searching for and referencing that show a lot of this in table form. If you want to look at it that way as opposed to screen capture form. More locations of the ribbons in PowerPoints. I'm looking at slides that Kate has only recently finished, so apologies for the scrolling. So moving on to equations. Sciences often have equations. There are ways to do it. Again, you should see a common theme. Use the equation editor in PowerPoint. Don't try to snap a picture on your screen. Don't try to post an image. Use the equation editor. There are languages called MathML and some other things that we'll try to get resources out for that are useful for that and can be read in speech or in Braille. And again, as with images, you should put an alt text on your equation. I don't know, transit of spaceship to the next planet, given our, extrapolation from our earlier panel, whatever you're going to call it. And again, more alt text. You need if you're going to do equations, you also will need to do graphs probably. So you'll need a description of the graph, both axes. So X is, I don't know, meters per second, or X is meters and Y is seconds. So this graph shows meters per second from light reaching, I don't know, the sun to the earth, whatever astronomical thing you want to put in for that. That would be important because you need as much description to allow the person to interpret the data on their own. And so that's why we advocate linking to other data tables and ways to get the raw data. And also sonification, which is producing data that is interpreted by sound. There has been a presentation, and I think there'll be another one tomorrow on that. And there are lots of YouTube stuff that we have done with that. Have I covered everything, Kate?
Yes, and in fact, I'll stop sharing now, and so we're going to stop there for today. And I'm to shout out to Christy Albrecht at GLAS Education for reminding me how much I tend to overtalk, and also suggesting a good stopping point for today. So tomorrow we're going to start. What I'd love for you guys to do is go ahead and try out some of these tools tonight, and we're going to come back tomorrow and show you how to access the accessibility checker that's available on PowerPoint, and we will walk through some issues with that, and we'll spend some time asking questions, and then Caitlin is going to tell us about what do you do when now you've got your presentation and you're standing up in front of people, and how can you make your presentation more accessible. We'll also highlight a little bit more about posters tomorrow, about what are some of the challenges when creating a poster in PowerPoint. So I strongly recommend that you, especially doing posters, you plan carefully ahead about how that structure is going to go, because when you are looking at reading order in PowerPoint, or that it will create the reading order for the screen reader in terms of how you created it, not the visual, how you scan through it visually. Whatever box you put in first is what the screen reader is going to read first. And there's ways to change that. But when you start doing a poster, that gets to be a challenge because you have so many items on one screen. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. And we have a few minutes now before we are done with our time for today, and we would love to take any questions. Cheryl is really our go-to. I've learned a lot from Cheryl, and that's one of the things that I would also advocate for that we do at GLAS Education, is that we never do a project in STEM and accessibility where we don't involve the target community at the ground level. We don't bring it in, people in to test what we've done after the fact. We bring people in at the beginning. And I think that that's essential. And that's part of what we want to help you with when you're creating your presentations for AAS. We want to be here from the beginning of your creation of your presentation to provide you feedback. So Caitlin, you can take over monitoring.
So we have been steadily gaining participants over the course of this. So before we jump into questions, I did want to ask if you could please share that QR code that you put on the screen at the beginning again, because a few people missed that and wanted to get access to those slides. And if you have any link that you could share to it, that also works. Other
Oh,
than
yes.
that, I did want to, again, just explain that this is part of a 2-day workshop dedicated primarily to American Astronomical Society members who give presentations that are like the ones that we're discussing right now, but is also open to everyone to learn about how presentations can be made more accessible. So, as mentioned, we would love to have everyone participate. Tomorrow, again, in this workshop would be happening at the same time in this strand. But anything that's going to be happening after the conference, so any feedback is going to be limited to American Astronomical Society members. And with that, as you are pulling up QR code,
I'm tempted
I
to
would
find where
like
it
to
went.
ask. Oh, well, maybe we can just share a link
A
afterwards
link.
then.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. Let me find that and I'll share my screen again after I quit fumbling on my computer.
But Cheryl, in the meantime, I'd love to ask you some questions.
All right.
Beginning with regarding color contrast. Should the contrast ratio be at least 4.5 to 1 or around that value? For example, is it okay to do white on black or black on white, which is at a much higher contrast ratio? And this is from Soli.
I actually do not have light perception, so I actually cannot evaluate color contrast, but my understanding is you can do it either way, white on black or black on white. I'm understanding that it's more common for people to do black text on a white background. Is that correct?
Yeah, in an ideal world, you would be able to switch between the two because there is a strong preference among people with low vision as to which way they prefer. And but it's not ideal when you're doing a presentation. So in terms of actual contrast measurement, that brightness measurement, it doesn't matter which order you put it in.
Okay. But that would be using black on white or white on black would be just as good as having a 4.5 to 1 ratio.
It would be, you know, it's even better. It's even higher. It's that's the maximum contrast you can get. What they're recommending is you're going to get to 4.5 is what we're going to be looking for when we're evaluating AA presentations for the AAS. And there's a lot more detail with that should you want to look at it. But if you follow what we've put in this presentation, as far as font size and color contrast, you won't have to worry about the other details for now, but we can provide additional resources if you really want to do a deep dive.
Okay. Thank you very much for that thoughtful answer. Up next, we have a question from Briley asking, why are sans serif fonts better for accessibility?
So I will answer that. Well, I can answer that from the standpoint of someone, I have congenital nystagmus and my eyes tend to shake, especially when I don't want them to. And so when you're scanning across that little extra detail, or when you start getting into the fancy fonts, for many people that makes it, gets the letters between each letters more confused, and they're just more difficult to see. However, if you start looking at fonts particularly chosen or created for people who have dyslexia or dysgraphia, they may actually accentuate some of those features. So knowing your audience is particularly helpful, but in general, if you stay away from serif fonts, then particularly in large presentation halls, you will have much better visibility. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. We have an anonymous question that reads, our organization has struggled to include our target audience at the ground floor. Any recommendations for starting those relationships?
I get this in almost every presentation I do across disciplines. It doesn't matter if I'm talking to a historian or a scientist. There's usually a communication problem where people don't always know what what local disability organizations are. And it involves a little bit of Googling, a little bit of emailing cold and say, hey, I'm working on a presentation on X, Y, and Z. May I send an announcement to your members? It involves a lot of relationship building that people don't tend to do until they've got a project deadline. So it may be that the organization hasn't spent time starting that process. But it is a common hurdle. You could think about, if you're at a university, you could think about asking people at your disabled students office who they deal with, who they know. If you're in a large city, that maybe has a school for the deaf or the blind, you can ask their community people. But it takes a little bit of research and a little bit of networking, and referrals sometimes have to come from one community member to another. And so if you're struggling, it might be that the project is due on Friday and you're thinking on Monday about who can you contact to come in and test it. So it may be a time, and it may be a relationship building issue.
And I would strongly support what Cheryl's saying. At GLAS, we started building these relationships almost 18 years ago at this point. And we did that because our observatory was very close to the Wisconsin School for the Blind and the Wisconsin School for the Deaf. And so that's where we started. And through the years, we've simply continued to do that. And at this point, what I would encourage, what part of what we do for National Science Foundation projects across astronomy is we try to advertise and make ourselves available to fill that role. So if you are looking to connect with different professional people who have disabilities, you get connected with a SciAccess working group, you get connected with GLAS Education, and we can assist you with building those relationships. And it does take a long time, but we can jumpstart you on that. And that was also the motivation for a grant that we submitted, a proposal we submitted this fall called the SciAccess Research Collaboration Network Grant. So we know that this is an issue coming up with and connecting and making sure that people who have disabilities and are working professionally are, can be part of the conversation on accessibility. So hopefully that will get funded and we'll do more work. But until then, join the SciAccess working groups and keep GLAS Education in your contact list.